When the coffee man comes. I barely know where to start this story. It's been haunting me for months, and I just need to tell someone, because I don't even know what to tell my family. Last year, my wealthy aunt and uncle, who have no children of their own, took two of my cousins and I on an African safari to Tanzania. It's this thing I've done forever, taking my cousins from all across the family on these grand trips to different places around the world. We were the youngest three, and we're the last to get to go. I'm the youngest of all, and really, this last trip was waiting on me. Well, I finally got done with college, and it was time. My aunt asked us to decide where we wanted to go, and Seth, Dave, and I, my cousins, started a group chat to discuss. In the end, we decided we want to go to the Balkans and Greece. Well, my aunt replied with two options: South America, Argentina and Brazil, or an African safari. We unanimously chose Africa. It sounded like the trip of a lifetime. I wish we could have taken that decision back with all my heart, but I didn't know then what I do know now. I didn't know about the coffee man. It's a stupid name, I know. Doesn't invoke terror, but I don't know what else to call him, what else to call it. If you've ever been on safari, this won't surprise you, but it surprised me. It's not difficult or rugged at all. Glamping might be the best term of art for it. It's almost absurd. You fly into Addis Ababa in Ethiopia and transfer on a prop plane straight out of 1955. It takes you to a gravel airstrip in God knows where, Tanzania, where an incredibly polite man introduces himself as your personal guide while you're there. You then drove for hours into even more nothing. No houses or structures of any kind. Then you reach an archway in the middle of the flattest plain of yellow grasses you've ever seen that says Serengeti National Park. A few more hours from there and you reach your campsite. This wildlife is incredible, by the way, but I'm not telling this story to talk about zebras and elephants. The camp itself is a series of massive tents with multiple rooms. They are solar panels and Wi-Fi. They have running water that they tell you to drink under no circumstances, or you'll risk dysentery or something. Honestly, by that point we were all exhausted, and I wasn't paying too much attention. We were led to two separate tents about 50 feet apart, one for my aunt and uncle, and one for us three cousins. I remember being remarkably pleased with our accommodations. That evening we all went straight to bed and fell asleep. Well, that first night was sort of difficult to sleep soundly. I woke up a few times in the night to hear a lion roar, and another time to hear what I'm sure was an elephant rustling through the grass outside. Seth, Dave and I all had our own beds. They weren't great, but they were miles better than what I expected. I decided that first day that I had totally misjudged what being on safari would be like. It ended up a lot less Jumanji and a lot more like being in a zoo where you're in a cage with wheels while the animals freely go about their lives around you. That's another thing. One thing that the guide was extremely clear on was that we were never, ever, under any circumstances, to leave the camp. We weren't even allowed to leave the paths between tents, and when we walk from tent to tent we are to do so in pairs. Finally they said we should go nowhere at night, and that there were walkie-talkies in our tents if we should need anything after sundown. I figured it was because of the animals. I wish it was because of the animals. Anyway, we woke up extremely early that next morning. I checked my phone and it was a little after 5 a.m. What woke us was the soft, inquisitive calling of a man in heavily accented English. "Hello?" he asked, softly and repeatedly. It was Dave who rolled over and said in the frustrated tone of someone who hasn't gotten nearly enough sleep, "Yes, hello?" "Coffee," came the reply. It was perfectly dark outside, still and quiet. Life in the Serengeti respects sleep far more than our minders did, I suppose. I lifted my head off my pillow as Dave stumbled forth from his bed towards the zipped entrance of our tent. He undid the zipper and I caught a glimpse of the black silhouette of a man at our tent's entrance. He was holding a large plate with 3 cups of coffee on the saucers. Dave took the coffee from him and muttered a thanks. The silhouette of the man remained perfectly motionless, but he said softly and politely, "Would you like anything else?" Dave grunted out a negative and set the plate down on a table near the entrance. He began zipping up the tent again, fumbling in his morning delirium. I was mostly asleep myself by that point. I wasn't prepared for being up at such an ungodly hour. But it was no mistake that we were woken, because half an hour later my aunt and uncle were at our tent entrance. "Wake up, little rabbits," my aunt called in a sing-song way that she's used on us since we were children. No need to mention that Seth and Dave were both nearing 30. That first morning was slow, and my eyes seemed to want to glue themselves shut. Seth found his energy first and seemed excited about the day. Dave and I were slower on the uptake. As we hopped into the safari rover that would take us crisscrossing the Serengeti for the day, chasing animal herds and searching for lions, leopards and cheetahs, Seth made a throwaway remark about the man who had been so kind as to bring us coffee that morning. My aunt frowned and replied that she and my uncle had not been woken up to coffee, but from a call from our guide. Apparently the coffee man had not remembered to bring coffee to their tent. The day was good, and I honestly didn't give the situation another thought. I won't lie and say it was the best time I've ever had. I'm not an animal guy. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy watching Animal Planet as much as the next guy, but there's a lot of downtime in driving on the safari. One thing that really sticks with me though is the deep sense of isolation that you feel out there. It makes you realise how your entire life is spent in the vicinity of other people. Anyway, that night we all had some beer and called it a day. I slept better this time. I don't know if the lion pride had moved on, but it was much more peaceful that night. I had strange dreams that night though, a black figure stalking through the grass. "Hello!" I bolted upright in my bed like a gunshot had just gone off. The word reverberated in my brain, soft and polite. My cousins shifted uncomfortably in their sleep. With a sigh I rolled off my bed and went to the tent door. Though I couldn't see him, I could feel his presence on the other side of the tent door. I mumbled out something about being just a second and unzipped the door. The darkness was deep beyond the tent, but the silhouette of a man holding a platter with 3 coffee cups was unmistakable. I murmured a thanks and thought about reminding him to bring my aunt and uncle coffee, but couldn't think of a way to do it without sounding rude. "Would you like anything else?" the coffee man asked. I politely shook my head and set the coffee on the table by the entrance. Without another word I began zipping up the tent entrance. I had almost finished when Dave called from his bed across the tent, "Ask her for some creamer." I sighed. Why hadn't he asked for it before when I had started zipping up the door? But when I got the zipper back open enough to fit my head through, I found that the space where the man had been standing was now empty. He must have moved on to give the coffee to the others. I said as much to Dave, and life went on. That morning I jokingly asked my aunt if they had gotten their morning coffee. She answered me seriously that they hadn't. My aunt is an intense woman. She's been extremely high up in government, just a heartbeat from being a member of the US cabinet, and was hand-selected by the president himself on 2 separate occasions to lead massive portions of the federal bureaucracy. And though she can be playful in some ways, there are certain things that she values incredibly highly. Performing a job properly was one of them. As we rolled out of the camp this morning, I heard her telling my uncle that she was going to have a word with the camp staff that evening about the missing coffee. At that time I thought she was being a hard ass about something trivial, but then I thought that often about her. The day went on, animals and sunshine. True to her word, my aunt marched right up to the camp director when we returned. I came with because I wanted a bottle of water from the main tent. The rest of the party went back to their tents to take a nap before dinner. My aunt asked why her tent had not been getting coffee in the morning, in a stern but not entirely impolite fashion, the way people do who have grown used to authority do. He looked at her with a furrowed brow. At first I thought he hadn't understood her, and then he said, "I'm very sorry, ma'am, but we do not serve coffee in the morning until breakfast." She shot me a glance that said she was wondering if I had been pulling her leg about this whole coffee thing. I responded with a look of my own, and then turned to the camp director and informed him that our tent had, for the past 2 mornings, been brought coffee. He looked baffled. He ended up calling over 2 other camp workers and speaking to them in Swahili. They responded with confusion at first. Then an old man, certainly the oldest worker in our camp, spoke up from the other side of the main tent. I remember the word because he said it so distinctly. Popobawa. There was more discussion, faster now. The workers looked concerned. The director listened to them for a few moments before turning to look at my aunt and I. "I'm very sorry, ma'am," he said, then turning to me. "And sir, but we don't serve coffee in the morning. We will be looking into this matter for you." After a moment he spoke again in a near whisper. "Please do not accept anything it tries to give you." It? I remember thinking. He just said it. My aunt was entirely displeased, no doubt already drafting a sternly worded email in her mind to our travel agent back in the States. But after a few moments more of unhelpful conversation, we retired to our tents. Seth and Dave were both napping when I returned. I grabbed my laptop and got to Googling. I searched Popobawa, and after a few spelling corrections was sure that I had found what the old man had said. I was somewhere between horrified and amused by the Wikipedia article. I laughed it off, some shapeshifter of East African folklore, bringing me coffee in the morning, and colour me terrified. I wanted to slap myself now for ever thinking of such things. The day went on, and dusk came. We had dinner with the entire camp because it was our last evening there. There was a lovely couple from Australia, and a group of Germans on holiday at a long table with us. The workers served, and the camp director sat at the end of the table like a lord. I caught the old man looking at me from time to time as he brought food and drinks. Something in his eyes unsettled me deeply. It made me think of that black silhouette standing in the doorway. It occurred to me that I couldn't remember seeing a single feature of its face, not even its eyes. I briefly considered asking the other group on safari if they had been visited by a man with coffee, but eventually decided against it. What would I say? Yeah, and apparently the camp workers think it's a demon. I'm sure my aunt would be thrilled to hear me talking nonsense like that. Instead, I got pleasantly drunk on an African beer and obnoxiously boisterous. Finally, my aunt scolded me from across the table for being so loud, and in my frustration, I excused myself and stumbled back towards my tent in the growing twilight. As I walked haphazardly down the savannah trail amid the tall grass, half again taller than me on both sides, I heard a rustle off to my right. Contrasted by the brilliant violet of the darkening sky, I could see the tall grass shifting maybe 15 feet away from me, but it was too thick for me to see anything inside the stalks and sentinels that guarded the path. It seemed to be coming closer, and I began to feel afraid. I thought about making a run for it. Our tent was only 100 feet or so further down the path, but then I half remembered some nature drama saying that big cats will chase if their prey starts to flee. So instead I began walking more swiftly, willing my drunkenness away. The rustling moved parallel to me, and was getting closer. It took all my willpower not to bolt there and then. In just moments, whatever it was would be right on top of me. Instead, I suddenly heard another sound, jogging footsteps behind me. I turned with sudden fright towards him to see one of the camp workers coming swiftly up the path, his flashlight performing a shadow play as it cut back and forth across the tall grass. He caught up with me after a second and politely reminded me not to venture off by myself, especially because it was now getting dark. I apologized lamely and allowed him to escort me back to my tent, vaguely aware that the rustling sound had stopped. Once I was safely in the tent, I tried Skyping my girlfriend back home, but the Wi-Fi was spotty at best, and in the end I gave up. Instead, I spent the next hour lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, trying not to think of anything. Popobawa, the man had said. I resolved to ask him about it the next day. Then I remembered we were leaving to head to another national park in the morning, and was utterly relieved to be away from all this nonsense. I relaxed and began to doze. Seth and Dave come a little while after dark. They had both gotten drunk with the Germans and were in very high spirits. With my eyes closed I heard them thank the worker that had escorted them, and then listened with growing annoyance as they struggled to unzip the tent. "Hey man," Seth called at me playfully. "Why did you storm off like that?" "Tired," I replied, hoping the subject would die. "Oh, tired?" he said mockingly. "Dave and I were going to play cards. You in?" I declined, and they didn't press the matter. I started to fall asleep to the sound of them playing poker, and suddenly remembered I needed to tell them about the coffee man. I thought for a few seconds on where to even begin. Finally I settled on, "Hey, we went to talk with the camp director earlier, and he said that we shouldn't answer the guy that brings coffee in the morning." My cousins looked at each other and then at me. "Why?" I shrugged, not wanting to get into it. Stupid. It's my fault for not saying more. The next morning the man came again. "Hello?" he inquired pleasantly. I woke up instantly. In my morning fog I began to answer before stopping myself. Instead I lay there with growing dread as the voice repeated, "Hello?" I may have been imagining it, but each time he said it his voice sounded more and more distorted, like it was a robotic translation of words, or like some animal that had been taught trick phrases. With lumbering movement Dave rolled out of bed and went to the door. I called out to stop him, but he turned and looked at me blankly. With a shrug he said, "Coffee?" and unzipped the tent. I was certain that something horrible was going to happen then, but instead there was only the black silhouette holding a tray of coffee. Dave accepted it with a thanks. "Would you like anything else?" the coffee man asked. "Yeah, do you have any creamer?" Dave asked. The coffee man said nothing, but for a hideous moment I was sure I could see a horrible grin plastered across its face. Dave stood there for a moment and then let out a long, "Okay," and zipped back up the tent. When the sun came up, there was no trace of the man. We packed to leave and boarded our Land Cruiser. To my surprise, the old man came up to me. His eyes were hard and determined. In broken English he began to speak in a whisper only I could hear. "When Papa come, no take, he began, speaking quickly, as though he had rehearsed exactly what he was going to say. "If take, Papa see you. If see, Papa take." I opened my mouth to tell the old man that we had taken coffee from the man, but my hand fell onto his shoulder. The camp director stood next to him and gave the old man a hard look. The old man gave me one last long look before walking back to the camp. We left that morning and went on with our safari. Eventually we came back to the US and went our separate ways. I continued having terrible dreams about a black thing moving in the night, only each time the scenery changed. Still I thought that was the end of it. Last week Dave went missing. He just vanished from his front door. His fiancée said that early one morning their doorbell rang and he went to see who it was. An hour later she said she found the front door open and my cousin nowhere to be seen. They just called off the search. You may have seen it in the news. Soon I'll know they'll be looking for me. So I guess this is my testimonial and warning. When the coffee man comes, do not answer it. Do not take what it offers. Very soon, I know it will take me. G'day folks, and thank you so much for watching the video. It means a lot to me to have you all around, and I love being able to read to you folks. If possible, I would love for you to subscribe and leave a comment telling me what you think. Until next time, take care and have a wonderful day.